Welcome to the SACNAS webinar on how to break into STEM academia. My name is Kateryna, and I'm honored to serve the SACNAS community as the Student Programs Manager. In this webinar, we will talk about if postdoc professor positions are for you, how to successfully apply an interview, develop research and teaching programs, prepare for a chat talk, and so much more. Before we get started, for our first-time attendees, welcome to SACNAS. We are an inclusive organization dedicated to achieving true diversity in STEM, where the field reflects the demographics of our country's population. As the nation's largest multicultural, multidisciplinary STEM diversity organization, SACNAS creates space where all members, partners, and staff feel they belong and can embrace and celebrate their intersectional identities. If you're not yet, we invite you to join SACNAS as a member. You can sign up for free by visiting membership.sacnas.org. Please know that you may submit your questions via the Q&A feature, and we will answer as many as we can. We also encourage you to communicate with each other via chat. Feel free to introduce yourself and let us know from what institution you are joining today. Just don't submit questions via chat, as they will be missed. Remember to always be polite, mindful, and respectful to others with your comments. So now it's my pleasure to introduce today's panelists. Our first panelist is Dr. Anna Maria Porras, is currently a presidential postdoctoral fellow at Cornell University, where she studies variations in the human gut microbiome across global populations. This August, she will start her own lab as an assistant professor in the Department of Biomedical Engineering at the University of Florida. Her lab will build tissue models to study how microbes interact with human tissue to drive disease. Dr. Porras is a member of the SACNAS Cornell chapter and has served as a reviewer for research abstracts, travel scholarships, session presentations ever since she finished graduate school. In 2019, she attended her first SACNAS conference, and she had a lot of fun serving as a mentor judge and being part of the first Postdoc Leadership Institute. In her free time, she loves to crochet, often her own microbes, dance, travel, bake, swim, read, and above all, eat ice cream. Our next panelist is Dr. Jose Vargas-Muniz. Was born and raised in Caguas, Puerto Rico. As a child, he watched the movie Jurassic Park, where he heard about DNA for the first time, sparking a deep interest in molecular biology. Driven by his curiosity, he applied to the Industrial Biotechnology program at the University of Puerto Rico, Mayulos, in order to further gain knowledge in the biological sciences. In 2007, he joined University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez SACNAS chapter as one of its founding members during his first year in college. Currently, he serves as the chair of Student Presentation Subcommittee at SACNAS. He obtained PhD in microbiology at Duke University. Then he was a postdoctoral fellow at UNC Chapel Hill's Department of Biology, and now as a faculty at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. Dr. Vargas-Muniz research group aimed to understand how fungal cells control their shape and cause disease. Besides the lab and the academic environment, Dr. Vargas-Muniz enjoys spending his time playing soccer or volleyball, photography, writing short stories, and reading not science-related books. And something he didn't mention, but he also enjoys raising his beautiful pup, Troy. So our next panelist is Dr. Nana Ankrah, was born and raised in Ghana, and moved to the United States for graduate school. He received his PhD in microbiology from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and performed postdoctoral research at Cornell University. Dr. Ankrah is currently an assistant professor of biology at the State University of New York at Plattsburgh, where he teaches microbiology, immunology, and general biology. For research, Dr. Ankrah is primarily interested in interactions between microbes and viruses and understanding how microvirus interactions impact natural environments and animal health. Dr. Ankrah enjoys mentoring students and participating in science outreach programs targeted at underrepresented groups in science. He also currently is serving on the SACNAS Student Presentation Subcommittee. Outside of the lab, Dr. Ankrah enjoys traveling, trying new foods, meeting people from different cultures, and learning about their unique background and stories. Our next panelist is Dr. Shreya Raghavan. Is an assistant professor in biomedical engineering at Texas A&M University and an adjunct assistant professor in the Department of Nanomedicine at Houston Methodist Research Institute. Dr. Raghavan directs her lab to research all things surrounding the cancer stem cell immune axis in metastatic cancers. When she's not working, she enjoys reading a good book, cooking, taking on baking projects beyond her amateur skills with her children, and hiking. So thank you to our panelists for joining me today. And before we move to the Q&A portion, I would like to invite the speakers to share a few words with our attendees. I will start with Jose.
Hello all. First and foremost, thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to discuss your question and trying to help you navigate this black box that we call the academic job market. I'm a new professor and basically a pandemic PI, so I started my new position during the pandemic, so it's being a little bit weird. I come to you from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, which is a research 2 or R2 institution, which means it's research intensive, but still not as intensive as a Duke or UNC Chapel Hill and that type of institution, but there's still really good quality of research. I mostly do 50% teaching, 50% research, while there's a dubious percentage of service that we don't know what it is yet. And mostly I work with filamentous fungi and how they control their own shape and how they infect different hosts. I'm Puerto Rican, as Kateryna mentioned. I'm also queer and proud, and I'm looking forward to hear from all of you.
Cool, I can go next. Hi again, everyone. I'm Ana Maria Porras. I was on the job market in the fall of 2019 and winter of 2020. So I went through the whole process. I was able to do all my interviews in person, but the entire negotiation process was in the middle of schools shutting down, which was an interesting experience. And I hope I don't ever have to give anyone advice on how to do that during a pandemic ever in the rest of my life. I am originally from Colombia. As Kateryna said, I don't start until the fall, until August at the University of Florida. So I deferred my start date for about a year. And what else? I was an international student for many years, almost 15 years. Prior to getting this position. So I'm also happy to answer questions about how that can impact your application and things you can do to mitigate the impact of that. And I think that's all I want to share for now.
Okay. I'll go next. So I'm Ankrah. I'm also a pandemic professor. Is that what Jose, you called it? I didn't know that was a term, but that's interesting. I also recently started at SUNY Plattsburgh. So this is one of the SUNY system schools in the fall of 2020. I also did my negotiation just when the pandemic was breaking. I wouldn't advise anybody to be negotiating during the pandemic, but anyways, I've been here for almost a year and I am in a liberal arts university. We do a lot more teaching, so it's more teaching focused. So if you do have any questions about working in a teaching heavy environment and whether it's for you or not for you, I'm very happy to answer those questions. I do research as well. I work primarily on Drosophila and its microbial symbionts. And I'm interested in how phages interact with these microbial symbionts and how all these interactions impact host health. I also do some work on Lake Champlain. So I do go on the lake, collect water samples, and look for viruses in there as well. And I'll be very happy to talk to anyone about any of these different aspects about my work and my experience thus far.
All right, I'll go. So my name is Shreya Raghavan. I'm originally from India. I grew up in India and moved here for graduate school to Michigan. And then I spent a decade and a half at Michigan and North Carolina doing my training and moved to Texas A&M for a faculty position. So just being from India, Michigan, and Texas, I love talking about the weather. It's all very different. So, you know, it's one of my favorite topics of conversation. I'm very excited to be here and chat with all of you today and to answer questions. I'm also a fellow pandemic PI. I started in spring 2020. And my lab got shut down before we could plug in our first pieces of equipment. We, you know, bought this beautiful fridge and we couldn't plug it in because we got shut down by the pandemic. And then we didn't come back up till fall 2020. So I'm just, you know, writing off 2020 as my first year and then starting afresh in 2021. I think the thing that helped me most navigate this entire process was finding and having a tribe to do this with. And you know, it's just like a quick introduction to what makes me me. And here as a part of this panel is to find my tribe and to surround myself with people that don't always look like me, but you know, can help me understand multiple viewpoints and navigate this process. So I'm happy to answer questions about my journey as an immigrant, as a person, as a woman in STEM, and as a person that just navigated this process recently, like everybody else.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing yourself. And so now let's begin with the Q&A portion of this webinar. So my first question to all of you is, how do I know that career in academia is right for me? What are postdoc career options are there? Who would like to go first?
So how I can go. So how do you know if a career in academia is right for you? First of all, you would be passionate about some research topic, for instance, or maybe passionate about teaching, right? And if you're in a PhD program now, you probably are passionate about something related to one of these two. That's why you're actually in the program. So I'm guessing you are already interested in pursuing a career in academia, and it's probably for you. But right now, maybe you're having some doubts. That's why you're asking these questions. It's hard to tell without having any additional info whether the career is good for you or not. Sometimes people start out their careers and within the first year, you would know that this isn't for you, right? So it's actually really, really hard to tell, just like any other job for that matter.
I want to add to that because I have a slightly different experience. So at the end of graduate school, I was really unsure of a career in academia and decided I was going to use my postdoc to figure it out. So one thing that I did while looking for a postdoc was I was very upfront with my potential mentors that I didn't know what I wanted to do. And that allowed me to try different things as a postdoc. So I tried consulting for a little bit. I tried doing tech transfer and patents for a little bit. And I really did not enjoy doing things that weren't research. And so I think that's what drew me back into academia. So I spent about a year and a half just trying different experiences and figured it out that way. So I think it's totally normal to not know that this is what you want to do.
I think there are when they ask what other options are out there, I think the options are right now almost infinite. Like when I was a graduate student, I thought my options were go to academia or do research in a company, but there's actually a lot of options outside of that. There is, like Shreya just said, there is consulting, tech transfer. There is science communication, which is something that I'm personally very interested in. There are jobs not even related to science that you acquire a lot of skills in graduate school. The thing that keeps drawing me to academia, and I mean, who knows if I'm still drawn to academia in 6 years, but the thing that excites me is, so I'm not interested in just research. If I were interested in just research, I would try to find a job at a national lab or somewhere else. I'm pretty sure that could be a less stressful job than the job I'm about to have. But what excites me is I like teaching, I like mentoring students, I like improving my community and my field. So to me, the academic job really has everything that I like to do all wrapped up into one job, that even though it is demanding, the other thing that is appealing to me is that you're more or less your own boss. Yes, you have a chair and a dean, but really you're pretty independent compared to other positions you could have in other industries.
Thank you for this thoughtful answers. I will shift a little bit with my question to current graduate students. What can a graduate student do to enhance chances to get a teaching job later? What are they supposed to gain from graduate school?
I can start with that, having recently been through the teaching job market. But you do need to try as much as you can to get teaching experience, right? It's very essential to have it. Not just because the institutions are asking for it, but so when you start the job, you've had a little bit of preparation for what you're supposed to expect out of it and how to handle it. Without any teaching experience, it would get very overwhelming very quickly, right? So my biggest advice for you will be to get some teaching experience. How do you get such teaching experience? You can start out very little by doing guest lectures for your boss's class, your PI's class, for instance. You could also just cold email professors and ask to contribute to their class sessions. Trust me, they would welcome one day where they don't have to teach any new content and let somebody else do it. So definitely cold email people. They will give you a chance and it helps you build your resume. If you can, you can also look for local community colleges that are in your area. They would typically have adjunct positions that are available for you to co-teach some classes as well. So this is the best advice I can give you from my perspective. The other thing I need to mention before giving others the chance as well is that a lot of teaching focused universities are transitioning to a point where they want a lot of research content for their students. So they want the students coming in and having a great research experience. So they will also be looking for an accomplished researcher in addition to a good teacher. So make sure you're really balanced going into the job market.
Kind of complementing what Nana just said. Try to engage with either the graduate school or the school of education. Your school have one. They have a lot of pedagogical classes that are really helpful. Speaking from my own experience, I was at Duke University for my graduate school. I did a certificate in college teaching, which I do fundamental of teaching, diverse and contentious issues and different classes that not only made me a better teacher, but also made me a better science communicator and basically helped me like develop as a professional. So those cool skills will come really handy. You can find it. The other experience that I have is that I was a GRF fellow, which meant that I had my own money and I couldn't like basically work as a TA. So trying to find ways in like you can be engaged or create your own course, both at my, I was fortunate that both at my graduate school level and the postdoctoral fellow, I was funded. So I didn't have to teach to actually get a stipend. But I found ways to actually create like a seminar course or like TA for a seminar course where I still get that teaching experience while not necessarily it's like tied to something that will disqualify for receiving those fellowships.
Thank you. You kind of answered the next question that came through. How can I gain desired teaching experience now while my PI emphasizes focus on research? Are there any summer programs? Maybe you have something to add to previous responses.
Yeah, so as I was saying in the chat, I did a similar program as Jose as a graduate student, but that was a different situation from what the person who wrote the question is describing. My PI at the time was very supportive. My postdoc PI, she pays or at least at the beginning, she paid my salary. I now have my own fellowship, and I really wasn't supposed to do any teaching. But what we did is kind of what Jose is describing. I led a summer reading group, my first summer here at Cornell. So it wasn't like formal teaching, like a class that had assigned a credit, but we basically did the same thing that I would have done in a seminar class. Here at Cornell, for example, there are 1 credit classes that you can also teach as a postdoc that only last 4 to 5 weeks and are pretty low commitment. So that's also something that you could propose to your PI. That's a much lower burden than if you were committing to teach a whole lecture.
Thank you. And one last question before we jump into the whole process of interviewing an application. Is it possible to get into undergraduate college teaching research position without completing a postdoc?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It is changing quite a bit, but currently they do recruit a lot directly from PhD programs. So it is likely you can do that. Okay. It is changing quite a bit because they are requiring a lot more research, as I mentioned, so their students can get a research experience, but it is possible. Do you want to do that? That's another question, because doing the postdoc provides you with additional training that preps you even better for starting a new career, I think, in my opinion.
Thank you. So let's talk about postdoc faculty positions. What does it take to get a postdoc faculty position?
Do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, what does it take to get a faculty position? I know it's a very broad question, but try to.
I'm gonna start with the I, in the sense of basically establish really early on what are your values and what type of institution you envision. Because at the moment that you're gonna hit the job market, well, not right now because pandemic, but at the moment that we did that, there's so many offerings of like faculty position and different like mixture of position, and there are gonna be different factors that are gonna weigh in the type of institution that you want to. Do you want to be in a very research intensive institution where more of your commitment is going to be on the research rather than the teaching? Do you want to do more of the teaching rather than the research, or in an institution like mine where we're fairly 50-50? How do you see yourself as a professor? Do you see yourself, what kind of your group do you envision? And there are things that it is good to start with like an idea, but that doesn't have to be cemented in there, but that will help you basically narrow down the different position. I would say start that process really early on in your postdoc, like start like investigating or like exploring different avenue or components. So that way, as you're progressing to your postdoc and you decide, like, for example, you want to be in like teaching intensive institution, you can basically dedicate more time trying to get those teaching experience that will help you write a really solid teaching statement and prove that you're actually a good teacher. You, at that way, basically navigate your training and take ownership of your postdoctoral training to serve you for the end goal. I will also say that when you're like applying for faculty position, don't wait until you think that you're ready. Sometimes it's really helpful to start getting into the habit of writing documents, sending it. For example, I think I sent out my first application when I was on my second year of postdoc, which is fairly early. It failed. I didn't get the position, but I learned so much out of there. I learned how to like basically make it a little bit more visually appealing, like basically have like a figure that will anchor people's attention. I also learned that the science by itself is not gonna sell you. You also have to like basically have a really clear thought out process, like basically applying for funding in my case. So you can basically start like basically applying, and when you get the denial, you have a good relationship with the people in the institution, you can ask for feedback. And basically different institutions have different standards. So that's kind of like real. That's why I started with an I, because once you understand your I, it's easier to apply and figure out what those standards that you would need to basically meet.
Thank you. Question coming from Sedalia, Washington State University. Do professor look for postdoc? Do professor looking for postdoc weigh the number of publications during graduate school heavily? What does a graduate student really need to do during graduate school to apply for a postdoc position?
I'll take that because I'm trying to hire a postdoc currently, but again, this is my experience. What I look for is not necessarily how many papers you have, but your ability to be able to do the research and talk about your research like you know what you're doing. And a lot of times, you know, it's not depending on the field, it's so field specific. Like in lots of engineering fields, it's typical to have 2 papers a year and graduate with, you know, 3 or 4 papers out of a PhD, but in some fields it takes forever to get 1 paper out. So I wouldn't think or weigh the quantity of papers as much as just your ability to communicate your research. Have you, you know, been to conferences, or have you had the opportunity to present your research even locally? And are you able to talk about what you've done in graduate school? That's one thing that I look for. So it's not really papers, it's, you know, how do you talk about your research? And the other thing that I look for, even in graduate students, is have you trained other people? Have you worked with undergrads? Have you worked with other graduate students? Have you worked with, you know, in a team? How do you do as a team player? Those are things that I value as a part of my lab culture. So, you know, when I look for postdocs, that's typically the kind of things that I'm looking for. And I'm happy to hear, you know, everybody else's viewpoints. The idea that publications, or, you know, you have to hit a number of publications is a little bit limiting for me.
Yeah, I agree with what Shreya just said. I mean, of course, I haven't had to actually go out and recruit a postdoc yet, but even in my personal experience, I think like a lot of what we're saying, it's going to be institution specific. There are some places, the MIT, the Berkeleys of the world, where who knows, maybe PIs who work there do weigh heavily the number of publications. And oftentimes when you're a grad student, you kind of have this idea that you can only go to a certain specific type of lab. But there are a ton of different PIs out there, a ton of different labs out there. Finding a postdoc position can be hard because unlike graduate school or even faculty jobs, it's not like they all open at the same time. It's not like there is an advertisement necessarily that a position is open. You kind of just have to reach out to whatever professor you're interested in working with. And so I'm saying that because what I'm trying to emphasize is that one thing that you can do as a graduate student that will serve you to find a postdoc, to find a faculty position, or to find any other job is to network. like network the heck out of wherever you are, like your local institution, a conference that you're going, Twitter, like use, if you're looking for a postdoc, let everyone know that you're looking for a postdoc. That's how I found my postdoc, especially if you want to go outside of your field of expertise. So networking is a skill that I know not everyone likes to network, but it's a skill that is necessary in life, really. It doesn't matter what kind of job you end up having in the end.
Right. And also to buttress the points that both Anna and Shreya have raised. So remember, the person trying to hire you is taking a risk, right? You are also taking a risk, right? So they want to hire someone who would fit and who would also get the job done. So you're coming in as a whole package. So this is where the networking plays a very, very important role. It's easier for a PI to hire someone if somebody they know tells them that this is a good person and will get the job done, right? So having a network where someone can vouch for you really, really plays an important role here. And it also protects you from going somewhere where it wouldn't be a good fit, right? So it's both ways here. So do think about how you will succeed in that lab as well, and not just finding a place to go, but how will it work for you when you get there as well.
And to piggyback on everybody's comments, we are currently accepting research presentation applications for SACNAS National Diversity in STEM Conference that is scheduled for this October. So make sure you use that opportunity. The deadline is April 16, it's approaching. So next question to our panelists I have, what components do you need to prepare for an application for a postdoc and later on a faculty position? Which components of your application are weighted the most or least?
I can start. At least for postdoc, different labs had different protocols. When I interviewed for postdoc, I interviewed in 2 different labs, and the way that they did it was completely different. One of them basically made me write a specific aim page. So basically a 1-page summary of your proposed research in your postdoc. And they were looking at my ability to like basically take a question and basically address it with testable hypothesis. So that's what my PI was looking for. The other one was basically SCV and a cover letter, like a 2-page cover letter where I describe who I am, my research and my research accomplishment. And basically they all ask for a letter of recommendation, which is fairly standard for like a postdoc, and my CV. So that's what they did for my postdoc. For my faculty position, because I was looking mostly at a research intensive institution with a significant teaching component, most of my application package included a research statement where I had to delineate basically the problem that I'm planning to, like the different problems that I'm planning to tackle as a faculty in there, and how I would do it, what are the hypotheses that I was testing or was planning on testing, and how I would fund the project. So that was basically my research statement. The other component was a teaching statement that was like basically describing me as a teacher. What are my techniques? What are my values as a teacher? And basically how I address different aspects. And this is something that when they requested, I added it. It was the diversity statement. So basically how me as a queer person of color contribute to the diversity of the institution, and how I will help mentor and support people from different backgrounds that might not look like the predominant culture in the institution. That was a really important part for me. So I would basically, the institution has a diversity statement. I will go basically write that 1-page statement. If not, I will weave it into my teaching statement. And the things that didn't fit in my teaching statement, I will weave it into my cover letter. So that was the things that I needed for at least the type of institution that I was applying to.
Yeah, I agree with Jose. My experience was pretty similar with postdocs. It really changed depending on the lab. I will say most labs, in my case, since I was applying to a postdoc to do research, so really the research aspect and the things in my CV that spoke to my ability to do research and to communicate that research were really the things that matter the most, and personality, because like everyone has said, it's also about making sure that you fit with the culture of the group. And then as far as, so Jose already described the components of your application. As far as what is the things that are weighed the most heavily, this again depends a lot on what kind of institution you're going to. So if you're an institution like NANA's, where you have to do a lot of teaching, then they're going to weigh the teaching statement more heavily than, say, at the University of Florida, where the research statement is going to matter more. I would say of those three historically, so far, the diversity statement has mattered the least, but given everything that has been going on in the last year, I think that is changing. Not everywhere, but I think that is changing in many departments. For example, one of the departments where I interviewed, my alma mater, the BME department at the University of Texas at Austin, I heard the other day that they are starting to look at that statement first. So that's the first statement that people are going to read from now on. So I think that's changing. The order in which people are reading things, it's in flux. But again, of course, if you're going to a research intensive institution, then your research statement is going to be crucial. No matter what, all of the statements are really important because, again, like Nana said, you want to make sure that you convey that you're a well-balanced individual.
Excellent, thank you. What are some interview tips, and how does a successful candidate application look like?
I'll keep it short. I have one short thing to say before Nana has like more to add. Sorry. You're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And I think that's really important to remember. I didn't do that the first time I interviewed. I was really nervous and I said, oh my God, you know, lots of imposter syndrome. Am I going to fit? But you're interviewing the university as much as they're interviewing you, and always remember that. And now for more useful tips. Sorry, Nana.
No, that's fine. I think one big part for anybody to keep in mind is that the interview process is a highly stressful process. So try not to go in pre-stressed, right? Do come in your natural self and try as much as possible to stay as natural as you can. It will help you through the process quite a lot. Be prepared to smile for a very long time and have a very positive attitude the whole day, no matter what happens. I think that is really key to surviving the interview process. How can you prep well for the interview process? I think just having a lot of mock interviews with your PI or your friends or people that can listen to you and ask you questions on a whim, so that you can respond to them would be a good approach.
I also want to add in terms of prep that, you know, you will have to do a research seminar, right? So have that ironed down, practice that with your lab group or your peers or whoever you have to, but you'll also get a list of meetings or people that you are meeting with ahead of time. And it helps to, you know, if nothing, to look through their websites and like their Google Scholar profile or something to see what kind of work they do or they have done in the last few years, to have points that you can talk about. So that's one thing that helps. You know, people are happy to talk about themselves. So if you give them that opportunity, it's fun because then you get to learn about their work and, you know, takes the pressure off of you. And so between your research seminar and prepping for the meetings, the other thing that most places will ask you to do is to do some sort of a vision seminar, or what used to be called a chalk talk, but is now, you know, sort of moved to a vision seminar of what you want to do over the next, or what you think you want to do over the next 5 years, you know, not just in research, but also, you know, what kind of things do you want to teach? Who do you want to collaborate with? Who else do you want to work with in the department, in the university? So those kinds of things to prepare in advance and do your reading and homework is also really helpful.
Right. And also to add to that, be prepared to show that you're ready to collaborate with people in the department. Because one of the reasons they're bringing you in is to actually move the department forward. And people have a need for certain skill sets and they're getting you because you probably match that need. And then very lastly, regarding chalk talks, a lot of us probably have never written on a board before. To do the chalk talk, if it's a traditional writing on the board, do practice it before going because people get really, really confused when they have to put their ideas on the board for the first time. So definitely practice it a number of times before you get there and then make it appear like you're doing it for the first time, okay?
Thank you. What does a typical faculty interview process look like?
Yeah, I can answer that. And I know this might have changed a little bit with interviews going virtual, and nobody really knows to what extent the interview process will continue to be virtual going forward, because it does save departments a lot of time and money to interview people virtually. But typically you submit your application. In some fields, like in our field in biomedical engineering, our annual conference happens right before applications are due or right after. So then we have a Meet the Faculty Candidate Symposium at which if you are applying, you present a poster and people can come find you. That's pretty common in multiple engineering disciplines, but not in every discipline. So figure out if that exists in your discipline. So you submit your application, then some amount of time will pass. And some candidates will get interviewed in a short 20 to 30 minute phone call or Zoom call. That's usually with anywhere between 3 to 5 people that are in the search committee. And there they'll ask you questions that are, it's pretty fast paced. So they'll ask you questions about your research, about teaching, and usually at least one question about how you fit that department and that institution. That's something that you need to have really clear in your mind through the whole process. So that happens really quickly. If you've never done something like that before, it's something you want to practice, because you want to have all your answers short and tight and sweet so that goes smoothly. From that point, then the search committee will construct a short list of people, and those people are the ones that are invited to a longer interview. It used to be an on-campus interview. I mean, right now in Zoom, everything is done through Zoom. And in that on-campus interview is where you would have everything Shreya just discussed: a vision talk, a seminar, meetings with a ton of people, including deans and things like that. And you'll also usually be able to meet with grad students or postdocs who are already in the department. If that goes well, then you might get first like a verbal offer, like, hey, we really liked you, we're going to make you an offer, or maybe not. And there's a period of time where you're just waiting for them to finish interviewing everyone and deciding who they want to hire. And then after you get that verbal offer, then you'll enter the process of negotiating. And so you submit a budget, and then negotiations happen. At some point, you should get a written offer, which again can be negotiated to some extent. And then you get some amount of time, which can also be negotiated. All of these things are like a lot of different things can happen. And then eventually at some point you'll sign with whatever school you want to go with, or you won't. So it's a pretty long process. So I started applying in late September, and I signed my offer exactly a year ago on March 31st. So it's a long period of time that you're doing this.
And then one thing I would like to add as well is that so during the on-site interview or the Zoom interview these days, you are meeting with an individual for the most part for between 30 minutes to an hour. One of the key things, one of the difficult things to do is to sustain an engaging conversation with a scientist. We are all very awkward in our own ways. So do have a lot of talking points. So as Shreya mentioned, if you've done a little bit of research about your projects, it's easier for scientists to get into their projects and talk a little bit more about it. And if you have specific questions, it drives the conversation forward as well. So do have those talking points ahead of time so you can get an engaging conversation going. Being able to ask questions about people's projects makes you look good as a candidate, and being able to follow what they're talking about makes you look even better as a candidate. So having this extra prep would actually get you very far.
Thank you. Another question came in. How often is the chalk talk an actual talk on the blackboard versus a vision seminar?
I think, at least for my experience, most of them has been actual talk in a blackboard or like a whiteout board. But to be fair, most of the chalk talk that I have seen is like basically outlining grants that you're planning on submitting. So that has been mostly my experience. And usually they're scheduled after your seminar. So the people that are coming to your chalk talk, the majority actually already went to your seminar, but it's always good to like remind them why you work and what your main hypothesis. Depending on the institution, you would do it the same round that you interview. There are other institutions that actually do the seminar first, and then they invite you to a second visit to get the child talk, and then they decide. But it would depend on the institution. And there are some institutions that only tell you that they're giving you a seminar, and then before you get there, they remind you that they also schedule a child talk, like it happened to me. But it is fun.
I want to add that it's also very, very discipline specific. So don't be afraid to email whoever, your search committee chair or whoever is running, whoever your point person is in the department, asking them to clarify what is the format for this chalk talk. Do you expect me to make slides? Because I did not ever have to go to a whiteboard or a blackboard. And I think it's very field specific. So mine was more my vision. So it was, less about research. It was like informal conversations with people that did attend about the things I plan to do, how I want to get funded, who I want to work with, or the kind of service that I was interested in doing, and a lot less focused on technical aspects. But it helps to just right off the bat say, I noticed that I have to do a chalk talk. Can you clarify what the expected format is going to be?
Yeah, and I think so Shreya and I are in the same discipline, and my experience was the same. I did 4 interviews, and all 4 were with slides. I will add, at one of them, they said they only wanted 10 slides and the rest were written on the board. I have a condition called an essential tremor. So I shake all the time. Right now I'm pretty calm, so I'm not shaking. But when I'm nervous, and you can imagine, like right before chalk talks, I always wanted to throw up. It's my least favorite part of the process. So you can imagine I would be shaking a lot. And I straight up told them, I am not writing on the board. Like, I have this condition. This is not like, we are not doing this. This is not going to be fun for anyone. And they had no problem with it. So if you, for some reason, there is some medical or mental reason, feel free to push back and be like, I do not feel comfortable doing this. So I had to do that with only one. And so then I just ended up doing whatever I wanted to do. But the other thing in like tips to be successful at an interview is exactly what Shreya just said, which is whomever usually is the chair of the search committee who has been in touch with you to invite you to come. Feel free to ask a ton of questions, like even if they sound silly, like, will I have breaks between my meetings? It's okay to ask that. How many people will be at my seminar? Are the people who are going to be at the chalk talk just from the department, or should it be more general? What kind of chalk talk will it be? Like, feel free to ask a ton of questions. If you're like me, the more information you have, the less nervous you'll feel, because you'll feel like you actually know what to expect.
Thank you. How do you evaluate the culture of labs, programs, universities during the application process?
Wait, during the application process or during the interview? Because during the application process, it's going to be quite challenging to tell the culture. You'd have to actually be there to interact with people. You can ask questions as well during the application process, but you do need to know people who are on site to actually do that. So it will be challenging during the application process to do that. I think for the most part, a lot of people just cast their nets wide and they do the screening after you've gotten like interview offers and maybe offers really, right? So in the beginning, you're casting your net pretty wide.
The one thing that I want to add to that is at these interviews, when you're actually on campus or these days on Zoom, you will meet with the chair of the department. And usually it helps to gauge what the environment is based on how your conversation with the chair goes. If the department is collaborative, your chair likely has a good strategic sort of leadership vision for the department, right? And they should be able to convey that to you, and that should sound right. Like it should fit with your values for what you appreciate, and that usually comes from lots of different conversations. The other thing that will also help you evaluate is look through publications and see, who's on each other's publications. Is this environment going to be collaborative? Are they going to lift you up with them as they go? Or, is it not going to be that way? That sometimes helps as well in certain fields.
Yeah, I wanted to add two things. One, I personally asked everyone the same two questions, which is what is your favorite thing about the department, and what is one or two things. At first, I started asking what is one thing you don't like, but when you ask that, people are not honest. So then I started asking what is one or two things you wish would improve, and then people are honest. I didn't have any bad experiences, but I've heard from other people that when you ask that multiple times, and especially in the what is there to improve, different people bring up really huge issues often, then it's a red flag. At the University of Florida, like a lot of people at that department would be like, I really hate our ordering system. And I'm like, okay, if that's the worst thing you can think to complain about, that's okay. And same in the what they liked, everyone gave pretty consistent answers that were in line with my values. So that was really helpful. And also do use the grad students and postdocs. You'll meet with them. They are more likely to be honest with you. Feel free to request specific group of students. I didn't think to do this. I have friends who did, but at UF, they did this for me on purpose. They knew the people I would care to meet the most were the Latinx students in the department. So they actually only invited Latinx students to their lunch with me. And I knew, like, we're in the same Latinx in biomedical engineering group. I knew these people would like not lie to my face and they would tell me the truth. So I think you can also gauge a lot from the grad students and the postdocs. And the other thing I wanted to say, and this is for the application portion, I'm just gross generalization from seeing all of your names, but I think a lot of you qualify, like most of us or all of us here, as people who will add diversity to the department. That's good for us, but it also means that sometimes departments will approach you in very inappropriate ways. So for example, I had departments that at our Meet the Faculty Candidate Symposium would come to my poster and would be like, just so you know, we take diversity very seriously. Apply to our school. And I would be like, do you want to hear about my research? And they're like, no, we just wanted to let you know. And like some of those departments would keep emailing me like months later to invite me to apply. And so to some of them, I was like, I just have no intention of moving to that part of the country, so I'm not applying. To one of them, I got curious. It was not one of the worst ones, but it was a department that kept reaching out to me. And I think right now, when a lot of departments are trying to improve in terms of diversity, I think that a lot of us who are in this Zoom right now are very attractive candidates, obviously not just for that reason, because you're already amazing. And on top of that, you bring in this added benefit, right? So do be careful with that. And so what I did is I talked to my PhD advisor, and my PhD advisor is wonderful because she never tells you not to go to a place. She'll just say, you should talk to blah. And so I called this other PI, and she didn't tell me not to go there, but she told me why she left, and she was a Black woman, and she told me her experiences, and that really helped inform my decision in that I didn't think that was the right culture for me. So I think for those of us who are in SACNAS and in judging from your last names, I think a lot of you will be in that position. So a place like SACNAS, for example, is wonderful because you can meet a lot of people who have a similar background to you, who work in different types of institutions, and feel free to mobilize your SACNAS network and be like, look, this school is reaching out to me. I don't know anyone at that school. Do you know anyone at that school? And like, I'm sure all of us at SACNAS will figure out a way to help you get in touch with someone who can give you a more honest description of what that department is like.
Right. Another thing I would like to add is that cultures do change at different institutions. So sometimes it gets a little tricky where you go into a situation where people who had been there before had either a positive or a negative experience. But at the time that you're applying, the culture has changed. So you do want to have as much input from as many people as you can about what the current conditions are like and what the current culture is like at the place where you're going. That would really help you to make an informed decision. And then also, very lastly, something that my PI did mention is no matter where you go, if you lift the carpet, it stinks. There's always going to be something that's going on at every department. So you have to weigh your options and weigh what you can live with, but there's always going to be something because you have people who are human and they're interacting. It always breeds some form of, confusion and conflict.
Thank you. The last question that I will take from our attendees. As faculty with backgrounds that are less represented in STEM, do you find that departments try to request your involvement with diversity initiatives more than other faculty members? How do you balance this with your other responsibilities as a junior faculty member?
I think one of the most powerful words that ever have been created is no. So I'm fairly open about the things that I'm interested in to be engaged and the things that I'm not interested in being engaged. So I'm really passionate about diversity. So I say yes to the diversity committee. But it wasn't like something that it was like, oh, Jose, you're Hispanic, you're queer, you have to be on the diversity committee. It was me like, oh, we need a diversity committee. Let's band together with other like-minded people and we form it. So it wasn't something that was imposed to me. I have sometimes people approaches like basically because they need one extra person or need a person of color or any identity that is not represented. And because I check so many boxes, they come to me. And the only condition that I say is like, if you invite me, you have to invite somebody else that is a person of color or a queer person, because me by myself, I don't represent that entire community and I cannot speak for the experience of other people. So most of the committee in the past that have said, if I had said, there was always somebody else with similar background or that is also a minority that is sitting in that committee with me. So that's kind of like how I handle it. Because I don't pretend to be the one know-it-all and everything like that for all the community. I don't expect to be the queer representative or the Hispanic representative. So if they're looking for me for that condition, I try to always bring something. And this is something that I learned from somebody in the board in SACNAS, but I don't remember who. And the other thing is I know what my priority is. I already told my dean that I care about diversity, I care about graduate education. And those are the committees that I'm willing to set. So they already know what are my priority, what are the things that I feel comfortable managing and handling. So whenever there's opportunity that is around there, they're usually approach me because they know that's the area that I'm interested in. But I'm also really upfront when I'm thinking about stuff. So that helped me at least in this aspect.
That's a great tip. Thank you, Jose, for sharing. So thank you for all your wonderful questions to our attendees. If you would like Unfortunately, we're out of time for this hour. If you would like to connect with one another after this webinar and continue this important discussion, you are invited to join our online group community. Follow the link on the screen and sign up or sign into your SACNAS membership to get started. Lastly, we want to hear from you. Immediately after this webinar, you will be redirected to a brief survey. I encourage you to provide feedback on today's program and suggestions for future webinars. I would also like to invite each of you to join us for another free virtual event specifically for community college students happening at the end of this month, April 30th, to help equip and empower community college students for degrees and future careers in STEM. I hope you all enjoyed today's discussion and have a better idea about the job market in academia process. This concludes our webinar. Thank you to all our speakers for taking the time to share your stories and all attendees for your engagement and insightful discussion. See you next time.